Murphy, aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Hugh Delaney.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee, aye. Okay, so that's continued until tomorrow night. Next one is the one that everybody's here for tonight. Case number 0320 55 SS LLC, 51, 53, 55 Summer Street, comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws 40B. And this is for construction of 240 rental units and 60 ownership units. I do have one thing to read, and I'm not going to read the whole thing into the record, but this is about board member Suzanne Murphy. She had a question whether there was a conflict of interest because of some property that her family owns, and she did everything correctly. She went to the selectmen, notified them, because the selectmen are the appointing authority for the zoning board. And what we received today, it's called a disclosure by a non-elected municipal employee of financial interest and determination by appointing authority as required by General Laws Section 268A, Chapter 19. And what it is the Board of Selectmen reviewed the case and looked at the information. It has to do with some property that's owned by Ms. Murphy's family, and it is near the South Walpole Square, or South Walpole Common, not within 300 feet of the development site. But just to be clear and be transparent, this was done, and the select board voted 5-0-0 in favor of granting the exemption for Ms. Murphy. So that will be on file if anybody wants to take a look at it. Okay, so
That's good.
Ashley, at this point, I think we want to let the applicant in, and Mr. Hale and his team can explain the revisions that they've done to the plan and where we are with the project. Thank you.
Yep, and just so that everyone knows, I don't see Amy Questle, Town Council, yet. I believe she'll be joining us, and then also here tonight is Sean Reardon, the peer reviewer.
Maybe Enright, isn't she?
He moved some things around so he could join us, so appreciate that. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Okay, and Jane, if you want, you probably should go to mute at this point.
Two.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Hale. If you would, do you want to walk us through the revisions you've made for the development and where you stand on the latest of your plans? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm actually just going to turn this over to Katie Enright of Howard Stein Hudson to go over the recent changes. I think you've seen most of them, but I'll let Katie explain where we are.
Right, so good evening everyone, Katie Enright with Howard Stein Hudson. I'm the civil engineer on this project. Just to kind of go through, you've received a very large plan set and a very large book of drainage calculations and supplemental data since the last meeting. Certainly we didn't want to go through that in its entirety with you tonight, so I'm just going to be brief and kind of give you an overview. Some of the text that's in red on this plan is basically the stuff that we updated the board with at the last meeting, and then we've clouded some areas just to show you the new items on the plan. So certainly one of the largest things that we showed you at the last meeting was to show you the emergency access and the availability of a water loop at 87 Summer. The new plans and details that you have in front of you tonight show that connection and all the details associated with that. Because of that, we were able to look at eliminating the boulevard at the main roadway A and shrink the width of the pavement coming into the proposed site. One of the new features that we looked at was to really look at providing additional visitor parking, specifically in the area of the townhomes, based on the previous comments the last meeting. So you can see as we come down roadway A towards roadway B, there's now 10 parking spaces on the side of the road there, parallel parking spaces, which would allow for visitor spaces to the 5 single families, access to the mailbox, and also provide additional spaces to the townhomes in roadway B. Roadway B we had changed. We used to have 3 4-unit buildings, and we've shortened up roadway B and provided 2 6-unit buildings there. As you come to the next intersection and move to Road C1, you can see we've added an additional 10 spaces in that area right as you approach the townhomes. And so there's an additional 10 spaces of visitor parking there. As you go down roadway C, we've actually provided 2 additional areas. There's a little 2-space area and an additional 3-space area in this layout. And then what we've looked at doing is all of the townhouses that are end units, we've looked at providing 1 additional space kind of off to the side. So we've increased the pavement by 1 space on those end units. So when you look at the visitor parking now for the townhome section of the project, we now have 43 additional spaces for visitors. That's over and above the spaces we have within the driveways and the garages that we showed you before. As you continue to move through the site, all of the intersections have been upgraded slightly to increase the radii at all of our intersections, and that's for fire access. So we had worked with the fire department to make sure that fire trucks were unobstructed by traffic coming in the opposite direction at each of these intersections. So all of the intersections have been widened to accommodate for that. We also, for fire protection, moved all of our ADA spaces and increased the striping in front of the doors along the front of the building. And this lines up with, if a fire truck were to sit in the access aisle, there would be direct visual and direct access to the door that would be unobstructed by a vehicle. We also looked at providing 2 additional staging areas, 1 at the end of each of the multifamily buildings, which you can see on this plan, and we talked a little bit about those previously. And then as you move towards the when we move to the area where the single family houses are at the 2 different cul-de-sacs, we're able to decrease the size of the islands. We found an acceptable size of the islands for the fire department, and we've signed those as no parking. We've also provided gates at both ends of the fire access. So that really brings us through kind of where we are. We now have, for the multifamily portion of the project, we now have 1.87 spaces per unit. For the single family side, we actually have over 4 spaces per unit, for a total of 691 spaces on the site. And just to speak kind of, the plans that you just received is the first time you've received a full plan set since May 1st of last year, because we've been working so much on the layout of this project. Just to kind of tell you where we've gone and where we've been, we now have over 1.5 acres less impervious surface than when we started. So we've removed over 1.5 acres of impervious from this plan since the plans that we issued last May. And we have 2 acres plus less disturbance of the site from where we were in the May submission of last year to our latest submission tonight. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how much the plan has been reduced as far as the disturbance to the property, and certainly also the impervious surface throughout. And that really covers everything that we've changed. All the details are in the plans and calculations, and we'd be happy to answer any questions tonight.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Enright. So, do board members have any questions? And I'm sure with the snowy weather, somebody's got some questions on that. Board members, any questions?
Usually snow removal is up my alley. Is it going to be trucked away? Is that how we're handling this since we have so many wetlands on the site?
Mr. Chair, can I answer?
Yes, go ahead, yes.
Sure, so on our layout and materials plans that we've provided snow storage areas that are outside of the restricted areas in proximity to wetlands. So I think it's best to look towards the layout and materials plans to see all of our snow storage that we have provided on the plans. It's difficult to see the space on this one sheet. I think if you look to those plans, we've recognized both the size of the snow storage areas. I believe there's square footages on those plans that shows you how much snow storage we have on site. in those areas and different locations to store snow. So we feel it's sufficient.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take a closer look at that, but
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yep.
Any other board members, questions? I've got a few. Okay, my first question, it's actually for the peer reviewer. Is Mr. Sean Reardon there?
Yep, here.
Okay, there you are, Sean. Okay. Ms. Enright talked about drainage. Have you reviewed the drainage calculations with the revised plan?
We're in the closing stages of finishing that review now.
Okay. Okay. So I look forward to hearing, what you come back with on that. 43 spaces for visitors. That's a improvement from where we were. So I think that's good. And how about a letter from the fire department on the turning radiuses? You talked about the ADA spaces in front of the buildings and the traffic circles. And Ashley, or can somebody answer that, where we are with the fire department on this?
Hi, Chair Lee, this is Ashley. We have not received a formal letter from the fire department on this yet. I'm trying to...
That's okay.
So,
I haven't.
no, we don't.
So.
Yep, we don't have a letter from them on this.
But I also, looking at the plan, do we also see a one-way road that goes from the multi-unit buildings, those large apartment buildings, into the duplex and single-family home area right there? Is that a one-way road now?
Yes, sir. We just added the arrow. Actually, it was the intention for this to be a one-way road, and that's what has been discussed with the fire department since the beginning of this project, so that we could limit our wetland impact in that area. That lane there is 20 feet wide and one way.
Okay. You also said there's less, about 1 acre less of impervious, and again, commend you for that. I'm assuming, does that have to do mostly with the footprints of the large buildings? Because before there were, I think there were originally 4 large buildings, and now there's 2. Is that where we've lost most of the impervious?
Right, so some of that is there. Some of it's the fact that we've been able to reduce the width of the pavement on roadway A coming in without the boulevard anymore. So even the new addition of pavement for the emergency access drive, we're still a little bit less there. We've decreased roadway B pretty significantly from where we started, and the fact that there used to be 3 buildings there versus the 2 that are there today. And then certainly as you move towards the back of the sites, the footprints of the 2 buildings, the multifamily buildings at the back, have been reduced significantly. And then also as you move towards the 2 cul-de-sacs, we've been able to put those islands back in. So that's some square footage there too.
And Mr. Chair, we also eliminated units between the 2 potential vernal pools on the eastern side of the site. And that was quite a while ago, but it still is a reduction in pavement.
That's right. That used to be roadway D. That was a few revisions ago. That's true also. That's been taken off the plan too.
And I'd also add that the circulation's become more efficient, so it's just a more refined plan as well.
And even with this this access going out to this new road going out to Summer Street, that's not for regular use. That's only for emergency access. I want to make sure we're clear on that. Just also for the neighbors, for them to know that's just emergency access. That is correct, right?
Absolutely. It's gated at both ends to make sure that it's only the fire department that's able to use that during emergency situations only.
Okay. And my final question or comment is, you said there's about 2 acres of area of less disturbance. How are you coming up with that less disturbance?
So working with the Conservation Commission, we've pushed the project into the site quite a bit more than where we started. We're completely out of the riverfront area now. And so we've made all of our drainage much more efficient and brought some of our drainage structures into the site and brought some of the drainage underground. We've also been able to increase some of the duplex units. You can see now in the single family area, we have a few duplex units on both sections of roadway, and that eliminated the space between them, which allowed us to shorten up roads and shorten up disturbance also.
Okay, those were my questions on the revised plan. So, any other board members have questions or comments?
Yes, Chairman Lee, just a question for Sean, I guess. I think when we started reviewing the plans initially for the project, you know, there was concern that the density of the development was such that there are lots of sort of marginally acceptable situations, like you know, at the time we were talking about drainage or impacts to wetlands, those sorts of things. And it still strikes me that although there's been improvement with regard to the reduction in impervious and reduction in the disturbed area, that you know, we now have a one-way roadway in order to avoid impacts to wetlands. And you know, I guess my general question is, do you still feel that the site is taxed, and has any consideration been given to reducing the number of total units in any way to minimize sort of the 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack kind of issue?
Yeah, I think a lot of my concerns related to density revolve around the single means of access. So I think a lot of my anxiety related to density fell away once there was an alternate way of getting in and out of this site if need be. I would say realistically that was 90% of my concern. I just couldn't reconcile this number of units being accessed only through one location, with all the utilities coming in through one location. The second means of access with the second means of water connection is a fundamental change for me. You know, I think, frankly, there's a lot of room on the site that's devoted to the wetland resources. In other words, the Conservation Commission's been able to negotiate some pretty healthy buffers that are actually fairly rare. So to actually stay outside the 200-foot riverfront area, that's a pretty big move. So I would say in general, I mean, certainly it's a lot denser than zoning would allow, but in comparison to some other 40B projects, I think this is in a reasonable place.
Okay, thank you.
I did have one question, Leslie, and I don't know if you could answer, but I guess the question would be, is there a balance between creating additional parking spaces for residents of this property without creating any sort of hazard during stadium events with people trying to sneak in or park on this property at the same time?
Is that for me, Drew?
Well, I apologize. Yeah, it was either, I apologize, I said Leslie, but I meant Katie, sorry, or whoever felt most comfortable with answering that.
So I'll answer the question. And, you know, on our plan set, you know, we show signage that says no parking during stadium events. It's essentially the same signage that's on the adjacent streets. And remember, this property will be, you know, professionally managed. It'll be part of the rules that, you know, people can't rent out their spaces or whatever. And I think that we'll do a good job of controlling that.
And Drew, I'd add, they've added a lot more spaces than I expected. So I think to your point, there is a sort of a logic that has to apply here. Is you know, does it feel like too many? The good news is they've shown them on the plan. They've incorporated that impervious area in their drainage calculations. So if the board chooses to say, well, that's a little bit too many, then the changes are relatively easy to implement. You know, but I do think it's a worthwhile discussion that, you know, do you need that many? But I appreciate they put a lot more in there than I was frankly expecting afterwards in response to our requests. The other thing too is the extra parking is, it's visitor parking, so it's not designated to anybody in general. So it could be used for snow storage, it could be used for a lot of things. So it creates that kind of spillover breathing space that if they didn't have it, that would potentially create issues other places.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any other board members with questions or comments? So, I guess I'm going to come back to, I do have one question. If you look at the single-family home units, number 34 on proposed road driveway D, if a person were to live there, they would have to drive all the way through the development and then come back to that unit? Is that?
No, so they just drive right in roadway A and then take a right. It's only one way in that tiny section.
Okay, that's, okay,
Yep.
that answers that question, and that's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Ashley, do you have anything? I don't hear anything from Ashley. Amy Questle, any guidance for,
Sorry, Shirley, my computer froze and I couldn't unmute myself. I would just say that we should be getting comments from fire department. We got these plans less than 2 weeks ago, so sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get those comments. And then I hope the board will discuss the offsite mitigation for traffic tonight as well.
Yes, we will discuss that tonight. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is open this part up to public comments. If
I may, thank you. I did have a couple questions. You had mentioned the 43 visitor spaces, and I'm looking at the plan set that was revised on 127, and I just wanted to be sure that that's the most recent plan set. And if that is, if we can go to the cover page, Katie, the numbers don't work, and I'm very, very bad at math.
It's actually the new plan set. Actually, here. All right. Yeah, if you could zoom in, Leslie.
On the parking,
Yeah.
The numbers that I have didn't come up. They didn't work. And
So we've got it broken out into lot 1,
Yeah.
and oh,
no, I think we lost it.
Leslie, you keep getting it and it keeps shifting. Let's see if we can, there we go. All right, there we go. So the townhouses each have 52, there's 52 townhomes, each of them has a garage space and each of them has a space within the driveway. And then there are access spaces both along the road and within the driveways to equal the 43.
Right. So, okay. So we have 43 plus 143 plus. No, we have 147. Okay. Go ahead.
Yep. And then in the apartment area, it would be 2 spaces per unit. We have 95 garage spaces, 202 surface spaces, and 14 spaces at the clubhouse for 311 spaces.
Okay, so just so I can explain myself, so you know how it says total proposed space is 311?
Yep.
I thought you were saying that was the total.
Oh, no, it's all the way.
Okay, got it. Okay,
For
so
the whole
that's
thing.
why my
Yep.
math is all wrong. Okay.
Okay.
And then the other one is, do we have any plan that shows the bedroom count, meaning the total bedroom? I know that I went through and I know that the first submittal, the application, the narrative had a breakdown of, the 1, 2, and 3 family or 3 bedroom designations. But is there a total bedroom count for lot 1 and a total bedroom count for lot 2?
Yes, and
David might know it off.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but it has been provided previously to the board, and we can get that to you. Hasn't changed very much.
Okay, so I was just wondering if it has been updated. I know it's been provided. I just was wondering if it's been updated. And then along that line, in your original application, in your narrative, you had mentioned 5 handicap apartments, and I was just wondering if there was still that number, or did that update?
So the requirement in the multifamily buildings is I believe is for 5%.
Oh, maybe that's what. Okay, and it's per building.
Yes.
Okay, and then I was wondering if on lot 2, have you designated which units would be the affordable units and which units would not? Would be the market rate? Has that been done yet?
We typically do that with mass housing.
Right. Okay. And then with regard to your construction schedule, are you doing a phased construction?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't really have a complete answer. I can tell you that, roadway A, in the emergency access, and it'll be phased, but not that much. I think we will need to complete roadway D and C because there's a shared sewer line, and so we do not have a general contractor at this juncture, nor would you expect us to. So those are details that we'll work out after we have a permit and are further along in that direction.
Okay, so will you? How do you plan on pulling building permits? Are you going to pull them in bunches?
They'll be done building by building.
Okay, even on lot 2. I mean, I can't imagine you would just be working on one house at a time on lot 2.
No, we won't. But each building will need its own building permit.
Right, but okay. So you don't know.
But David, we'll have a phasing plan for sure, as we always do, and we have to, I think, provide that as part of the SWIP. In addition, so we'll have a phasing plan that'll show our plan of attack.
Yeah, Amy, and we'd recommend that we include a condition in the permit that we get a comprehensive construction management plan, because we're going to need to know where temporary turnarounds are for fire department if roadways get partially completed. Yep. So to David's point, there's a lot of thinking that needs to happen, and it's going to get influenced by market conditions as well, I imagine, but definitely we want that in place before they pull building permits, so we have an understanding of where the construction trailers are going to go and things like that, so the neighbors understand what to expect before it actually happens.
Okay, and then I was just wondering if I noticed that you're only doing sidewalks on one side of each roadway, and I didn't see on the plans, but I do only have a small set. Do you have ADA ramps on the sidewalks?
So they will be designed to be ADA compliant. Okay. Yes.
And then, so I assume that lot 1 will be completely sprinklered, and I was just curious as to lot 2.
No.
Okay. So how far? What is the distance? The average distance between the dwellings on lot 2, side yards?
I believe it's 20 feet between units. Patrick, Chair, correct me if I'm wrong.
Doesn't look that much.
This Patrick Bogle. Almost every unit is 20 feet apart. I think there's one or two that is not.
Okay, and then my last question, Mr. Chairman, is that I understand that Lot 2 is going to be in a condo association. Is that still the plan?
Yes.
Okay, and then Lot 1, what will the ownership of Lot 1 be?
It'll be owned by us through special purpose entity. And there will be a homeowners association between the condo association and the apartment owner that will manage the common infrastructure.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, I do have a question about staging. If approved, what would, obviously we don't want equipment and deliveries being out on Summer Street, particularly with the tracks right there. Do you have an area that would be the staging area for construction vehicles and everything entering the site?
Absolutely. Yeah, it would all have to be off of Summer Street. And we have that area right off of Summer Street. That's a flat open area that I would suggest as we're developing our construction management plan. We'll have specific areas called out for deliveries to be brought into the site.
Okay,
John,
so,
to that point, those first 5 homes are like an ideal location to put construction trailers, and then those are the last 5 homes you build on your way out.
okay, so that's the kind of condition that I think the zoning board would actually put that in if approved, to say that there has to be staging off, off-site, on site, so that we don't have anything backing up into the roadways. So, okay.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Any other board members with questions or comments, or town council?
No, thank you.
I have one quick one, please, John. Am I to understand, is there going to be a condo association, an HOA, and is it going to be 3 different associations?
No, there's going to be an apartment owner that will own the rental side. There'll be a condominium association for the ownership side. And then those 2 entities, the apartment owner and the condominium association, will be part of a homeowners association that shares the cost of plowing and maintaining the common roads and utilities and detention basins and sewer pump stations, etc. It's a pretty common structure for these kinds of developments, or any other kind of shopping center, industrial park, where there's multiple entities that share common infrastructure.
Sorry, we've just never done anything like that. That's why I'm asking. Sorry.
No,
It's not common. It's not common for us.
Well,
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, does the overall homeowners association only cover, for example, the road until it gets to Lot 2, and then the road from Lot 2 to all of the dwellings is covered by the condo? I mean, how do you separate out, in a situation like this, how do you separate out what's common and what's not? Have you figured out where drainage goes, et cetera? How are we doing that?
Yes, this is what we do, and so we have a plan, and we'll execute cross easement plans that will be filed and recorded, so that the condo association and the rental entity have very, very clear understanding of what the budget is for the common infrastructure and who pays for what portion.
So I guess, I'm sorry, maybe I was confusing. My question is, what is the common infrastructure? Is it the road that goes, where does, so for example, you come into the road, you come into the development and you go down, roadway A.
So
when does that stop being common?
So it stops being common after the first, right about where Leslie's pointer is.
Okay, now I understand.
But the emergency access will be common. There's a pump station that is common. The one-way portion of roadway D is common. And there's a detention basin, 2 detention basins that are common.
Why would the one-way portion be common? How would the homeowners ever go that way?
Well, emergency vehicles and the buses will go that way.
Okay.
It's kind of in our budget, it's immaterial where we draw the line there.
But David, one entity would be responsible for maintaining all of it.
No, that's what I'm asking, and he's saying no.
Right.
No, but I asked you what the common, when that common road ended, and you said it ended at Leslie's right there, so it doesn't cover everything. That's why I'm confused.
Can I try to explain, David?
Sure.
So there's a homeowners association that comprises all the people in development. That homeowners association will be responsible for all of the infrastructure. That's the way I would recommend you do it.
That's not what he just said, though.
It's true. That is exactly how it will happen.
Yeah.
He's talking about who pays for what, but what you're talking about is who takes care of what.
Mm-hmm.
And the homeowners association will take care of the entire development.
So what's great about that, Amy, is if DPW has an issue, if anybody has
No, I'm fine with that. I didn't like it the way that it was explained earlier about road stopping and stuff.
Yeah, I apologize. I was thinking of budgeting versus legal control.
And I assume that with regard to the dwelling units on lot 2, the contribution to the homeowners association will come from the condo association.
That's
not
correct.
from each individual homeowner. Okay.
That's correct.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And those are real important questions to get clarified. So thank you, Amy, for asking those.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other board members with comments before we open this up to the public for their questions and comments about the proposed development site? Okay. Ashley, are you the gatekeeper for this meeting?
Actually, I am.
Okay.
So, hi. We have 3 hands raised right now, so I'm going to go with the first one, which is Bill Hamilton. Bill, whenever you're ready, you can talk.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, my first question is for the peer reviewer. You said you're comfortable with the second exit, which is which exit?
The emergency exit?
You're comfortable with that?
Sorry, Mr. Hamilton, if you could direct your question to the chair, that would be great.
Oh, okay, to the chair. Why is the peer reviewer comfortable with that exit?
I'll just say that we were looking for a second access point. Actually, whoever just took the map off, please put that back up. We want to have it so that there's an emergency access, and that was one of the things that we had been asking for the whole time. So that's why I believe that the peer reviewer said that it's an improvement to have a second access point. Okay. Next, Mr. Hamilton.
Okay, I've stood at that location. I'm pretty sure there is a driveway located there, and I stood at that. And I wouldn't take my life in my hands trying to walk across Summer Street at that location. So I'm not very comfortable with that as a second exit. In fact, my concern is the MBTA took over the CSX railroad only for an emergency purpose, so that they could maintain traffic from Boston to, from Boston to some places like Framingham and into Rhode Island. But
Please keep, we're not talking about Boston and Framingham, we're talking about this site right here. So,
well, at this site right here, at the railroad crossing, that was an emergency crossing. And now it's going to be a very big crossing with more than 6 markets sending trains, 6 different train routes towards that intersection. And now with 300 more vehicles coming out of this project, with the only real exit is at the railroad crossing, the opportunity for a gridlock. And now the problem with the railroad crossing is it cannot warn the driver of the train if a vehicle is stuck on the tracks. The signals come down, the signals go off, the gates come down, the vehicle is on the tracks, and it's just too bad for the people in that vehicle. And when the gates come down, you've got 20 seconds to evacuate the vehicle. For a mother with 2 children in safety seats, she may not be able to make it. So I'm very concerned about the safety of this. And the MBTA has not corrected that safety problem, and that was one of the safety reasons CSX abandoned that crossing. Now, the other question I have is, okay, that's going to be a emergency exit for the fire department only. I heard that. Now, does that mean that the fire department will be having 3-person police detail like we talked about at the last meeting?
So that's the kind of thing that we could put into a decision if approved by the zoning board. The zoning board would say anytime that gate is open, that there would have to be a police detail at those gates, or they'd have to be police because it would only be open for an emergency situation.
Okay, so if it was opened, it would have that we talked about at the last meeting, 3 police officers there. Okay, now the second question is the amount of chemicals for snow not allowed on the roadways in this development?
So why would they not be able to use road chemicals on this? I'm not
Wetlands.
Well, not the wetlands. It's in our aquifer. It's in Area 3, which is aquifer 40 foot or less, and it's hydrologic connected to the well field, which makes it by state definition. And we filed and got the Secretary of Environmental's approval to make that Area 3 as a Zone 2. Now we have 2 Zone 2s, Area 3 and Area 2. Area 2 is greater than 40 feet. Area 3 is less than 40 feet, but it is still an aquifer, and any chemicals going into the ground, seeping into the ground, going into that aquifer, we're going to drink. And so you've got to ban all chemicals in that development as far as the roads go.
Okay, Mr. Hamilton, to ask one question. Is there a similar ban on Shufelt Road, Summer Street, and Neponset Street?
Are they in Area 3?
Well, it appears that they're adjacent to this. So one of the things, we'll put whatever, as a condition, we'll put whatever is necessary, but we cannot put conditions on this project that the town's not following on other parts that are in the same zone. So
okay, I understand what you're saying, but just remember, 128 has large portions of 128 that you cannot use road chemicals. And that's a fact, and it's 128. Now, there are some roads that used to. Now, I know that the town of Walpole had banned chemicals in certain areas, in certain streets. Now, I don't know if the street you're talking about is banned, but I understand that there is going to be a water and sewer meeting coming up for this project, so we can certainly talk about that. But in area 2, you shouldn't be allowed. You should not allow any chemicals, because this project is going to reduce the amount of water that recharges our aquifer, and that aquifer being recharged with a little less water means that any chemicals in it are now more dense. So you don't have the water volume to make the chemicals less dangerous to the population. You need to have that restriction, and if that's, and the other thing is the area, the impervious area. Area 2 by state regulation says 15% impervious, and this project is not sticking to that, and it should.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Reardon, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hale.
I just want to point out that this project meets the criteria for Water Resources Protection Overlay District Special Permit. And I think the stormwater system, actually Phil can explain it, if that's okay.
Yep.
Good evening.
That's fine. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Phil Mackey, permitting counsel, I guess, for 55 SS LLC. I heard what Bill said, Mr. Hamilton, and respectfully, I disagree with him on a few things. Per your earlier comment, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I am sure your decision will say that we have to comply with all of the applicable portions of Section 12, which is the watershed protection district. And we believe the plan does, or we would have been talking about waivers, et cetera, for that. And I would like to make it clear, because we haven't really discussed the specifics of the watershed special permits. The threshold under Section 12 is 15% if you're in Area 3. We're in Area 3. The language of the bylaw clearly provides that for this or any other project, we can apply for a special permit under Section 12 to go up to the baseline or the underlying district's impervious coverage, which in LM, I believe, is 70%. We're well under that, but the point I want to make about this whole piece is not that there's numbers on a page. The threshold for your board to grant that special permit, were we going that route, and presumably what Sean and Tetra Tech are reviewing to make sure that we comply, is that we can sufficiently recharge the water into the ground, and that it will not degrade the town water system. Those are the seminal pieces of information that anyone developing in the watershed needs to adhere to. In this particular case, and I can let the engineers talk about the stormwater or whatever other actual technical details you would prefer, because I certainly am not the expert there, but between the detention basin, the underground infiltration, and everything else has been designed into this project, there isn't going to be a degradation of the water. And in fact, even though we're above the 15% total impervious, because of the stormwater system and the stormwater management practices, and conservation is having their cut at the apple too, which I understand is not necessarily something you consider, but in all reality, we're going through this twice to make sure the water gets where it belongs and it's clean. So respectfully, we haven't gone through each of the criteria in front of your board. We certainly could if necessary, but the way the project has been designed, and I'll let the engineers and peer reviewers weigh in now or subsequently if that's more appropriate. We believe we comply with everything and that there is no detriment to the water, and we are recharging well above whatever minimums would be considered appropriate for here. So
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the standard is if we meet the Mass Stormwater Management Guidelines, we've met the standard in Article 12.
Oh, I'm sure you're right on that. What I'm looking at, I just pulled it up, is the primary recharge area, and this is part of it, but so is most of South Walpole. So a discussion over the chemicals to be used on the roadways. You will comply with whatever the requirements are, and we can put that in as a condition. So I think that we can move on from there. So, okay.
Chairman?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Delaney.
Can I just, is it necessary to have monitoring wells? I've heard numerous abutters to the project in their concerns over the watershed and the aquifer. Is that something, Sean, maybe you can touch upon? Maybe the applicants propose this, or if it's necessary or not, would it be beneficial for the town to know that there was something like that provided on the property, so that down the road we could check this or monitor it, I guess?
So what we did very early on in the process, one of our original tasks was to look at the environmental history of the site. And we did a pretty thorough records research and looked at all the documentation and determined that this particular area of the site didn't have any evidence of contamination. So there's no predetermined issue out there. The data points are always great. At a well or two that we're able to be sampled to confirm expectations, that would be excellent, but there's nothing in the history that suggests that there's anything to be, addressed.
Yeah, I guess I apologize for my unknown knowledge about monitoring wells, but, as Mr. Hamilton stated, any sort of desalting or anything that could be potentially running off the property and into the aquifer, would a monitoring well or something of the nature, does that serve any purpose?
Yeah, you're not, the issues in the aquifer are super macro level. This project is super micro level in comparison. The extent of mitigation on this site, so we mentioned the Massachusetts stormwater standards, very, very prescriptive requirements for how you handle stormwater. And to manage a lot of different things, to manage quantity, how much comes off, to manage quality as well. So there are rules in place and very stringent rules in place. That's what we're reviewing the project against right now, that protect all those interests. That being said, the type of applications that you use on a road surface are usually salt or sodium or some other salt-based product, or sand. Sand and salt generally get taken up in the environment pretty easily, aren't going to end up in the aquifer in any substantial volume that would ever change the characteristics of the aquifer, at least not based on this. Phil actually mentioned the Route 128. We actually did a lot of the initial work on that. The reason 128 is so regulated is because the Cambridge Reservoir, which is a surface water drinking water supply, is that body of water right next to 128. And the highway discharges directly, the drains discharge directly to the reservoir. So there's very little pretreatment, very little mitigation. It's all old infrastructure. So it's a little bit of a different animal. An aquifer is fundamentally different, draws from a much larger area.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you very much.
But I'm sorry, Drew, but to answer, if they put in a couple wells, it certainly would be a nice area to have a sample every once in a while if the town ever needed it. So it's certainly, it's probably a $1,500, $2,000 item. If the board wanted to add a condition that asked them to put in 2 or 3 wells, we could pick a couple good spots for it. That would be good to have in the future if needed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just, speaking to hearing numerous abutters' concerns over that, I thought the question should be raised. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and one last thing. All of their discharge goes to a large wetland. In the wetland's primary function, the reason they're so aggressively protected is because they serve exactly that function. They clean the water. So when you have salt in the road, the wetlands, when you have suspended solids on the road. The wetlands are the sort of the cleansing mechanism that the environment uses to clean up water before it goes into the ground.
Okay, Mr. Reardon, thank you for your comments on that. Ashley, who do we have next?
Okay, so next we have Joanne Mulligan. Here you go, Joanne.
Thank you. Can you hear me, you guys?
Yep.
Thank you. Chairman Lee, I was wondering if I could ask a question that many people seem to be just not straight on, and I know I'm not, and I've been reading everything like a million times over, and it kind of follows up to what Sean Reardon was saying, so I'm glad that Sean's here tonight. But one of the things we're all, I think, just concerned about, we want to make sure everything's fine, is the property that Omni has bought. Part of it was part of it was bought by Baker Hughes. Is any of that land, was it classified under 21E?
So,
like the rest
Chairman,
of our machine property?
okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Hale. Can you answer that question?
Yes. So none of the property, none of our property was classified as 21E. Our environmental scientist went through all of the records. There is absolutely no history ever of any industrial use of the bird property on the west side of the tracks. It was just farmland.
On the west side. Okay, so even Mr. Hale, when you talk your property, obviously you're talking about the piece you bought from Kofsky and the piece that you bought from Baker Hughes.
Yeah, both only used for farmland.
No, that is great, but in reading that Phase 5 report, there's just so many like comments that are just like, this is not gonna achieve a permanent solution, and when they're talking all about no significant risk, and I just feel like there's so many, what I would say, not clear cut comments about, some of the testing. I know the arsenic levels are still high, and that is definitely shown in the Phase 5 report on the graphs. But I don't know if Sean, if you're the right person who could answer this, but even in the Tetra Tech report, it kind of goes back to, let's look at the, go back and look at the Phase 5, the status on the remediation, and it certainly makes tons of sense to me to put in some monitoring wells or anything that can monitor. And I guess the question also would be is, once construction happens, I am so not an expert, so I would love you to comment. Once you're, messing up the dirt and digging in it, and, does anything potentially get exposed? And I believe that you guys are going to put a condition that, things get tested, obviously during the construction phase. But I think this is a gigantic worry for the residents, locally and really in all of Walpole. And I think that I wanted to ask this tonight. I know it wasn't like the topic for tonight, but I think that, we're not experts, and I think we really need to hear what you just said, Mr. Hale, just to know that everything possible has been done, that there's no contamination that's going to get spewed up, or that anything is, I hate to say, being overlooked. That's a tough site.
Okay.
So, Gary, you want me to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the questions, Mr. Hale, I heard that, mention of arsenic. Are we talking about the other side of the tracks, the north side of the tracks, or are we talking on your property?
No, so there were zero reportable substances found on our side of the property in either the soil or the water testing. Zero reportable substances.
And Mr. Chair, that's consistent with one of our first tasks was to look at the environmental issues with the history of the property. what we found is we look for a couple things. First of all, as David mentioned, you look at the site. This particular land area, there's no history of the industrial uses. You have to look at nearby property, and this is what Joanne is, I think, speaking of. There are environmental issues associated with those old industrial properties, but then what we look for is, well, what's the record? Are they being taken care of according to the MCP, which is the Massachusetts Contingency Plan? And all they're up to date. All the records indicate that they're being taken care of properly. And then we had our LSP, our licensed site professional. These are Massachusetts registered professionals that deal with contamination and contamination transport in the soil and groundwater. And what our LSP determined is that the direction of the contamination would likely move from those projects is in a direction away from the site. So very little risk associated with the industrial in this particular area with there being contamination. But to be said that old land that's laid fallow for a long time sometimes has dumping issues. So there are rules in place that if you uncover things during construction, that you have to provide notification to DEP and things like that. So it's pretty heavily regulated. If something happens, DEP will be on it quickly. The end result, if it just takes 4 or 5 wells to provide a level of certainty that there's no contamination there, it's a relatively modest ask.
Okay, thank you for your input.
Lee, so basically EPA is the one that really is monitoring this, but they can't monitor something if there isn't a well, right?
No, the EPA is not monitoring this.
No, it's the Department of Environmental Protection, the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
I meant DEP.
Stan, can you go to mute? Thanks.
Yeah.
In the DEP, by looking at some of these phase reports, they, obviously are doing testing multiple times a year, right?
They do.
I mean, depending on what they've been seeing. So what do we do about the arsenic like that? Or you're saying that's on just Sean, that's like on more the Machine property?
I don't know specifically what contaminations are out there, but I presume you've got arsenic from one of the reports. Yeah, and there's very exhaustive sampling requirements, treatment requirements. I don't think there's any aggressive treatment going on, so I don't think there's any active remediation on these sites. I think it's just a matter of the natural degradation of the contaminants. So that tells me that the concentration levels aren't terribly high if DEP is not mandating some more aggressive action. Just keep in mind too, arsenic is present in soils naturally, so not necessarily an indicator of a contamination plume or anything like that.
Yeah, I kind of use that because I know that as opposed to some of the other ones. I'm really looked at the graphs and not the tables, and I just would see the line that it shouldn't be above, and they were for a couple substances. So it's just looking at your comprehensive the contamination history that you wrote up, Sean, back in April, and I'm sure you did an absolutely great job, and I do think there's no active remediation going on right now, but it just is tough when you're reading, it doesn't appear, and it doesn't seem to appear generally stable. I get it about where the water's going. I get it. Well, what if we have like drenching rains? Does it ever, change the course? I don't know, because there was some comments about seasonal things, and the numbers being different depending on, like, say, worse in the winter, or after the snow's melting. I don't know, but I just want to be really.
Yeah, Joanne, the key thing is the place you want to be concerned about is things that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. In other words, if people are not, if nobody's taking care of the land, or if they're not complying with what DEP is telling them to do, if they're in compliance with DEP, you can trust that DEP is protecting the public health. Issues come when people abandon property or when people aren't doing what they're supposed to do. As long as the record is complete and they're doing what they're supposed to do, you can usually, move on with a high level of confidence that it's safe, because DEP, that's their charge, is to keep the public safe.
No, and I totally appreciate the expertise that they have, that you guys have. You know, there's a ton of people in this town who have passed away or have cancer, and it's alarming, but, you know, I can't throw that, you know, you need facts really behind that to be able to, you know, look at the clusters, but a lot of people down in South Walpole, and, you know, it's making everyone really nervous.
Yeah, I'd say if it makes you feel any better, I mean, one of the more dangerous things is when stuff goes untouched and unnoticed. You know, they're going to be doing a lot of work out here. If there is an issue, they'll encounter it. So you'll see evidence of it. So in a way, development kind of exposes those things that otherwise could just lay hiding for decades. So in a way, this is good, because you're going to get a chance to see what's under the ground, get a chance to make sure that you don't, you know, if a bunch of drums were dumped at one time that are just sitting out there and nobody knows about them, well, they'll be found now.
Oh, exactly. So that's great. All right, thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Okay, Amy, who's next?
Yep, so next is John Cosellis. Here you go, John.
Good evening, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Oh, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Cosellis. I live at 20 Lasivita Drive. I had a concern. I have a few concerns. My first one being Summer Street, where the emergency access is. There was just a huge accident there where like a car ended up on the front lawn of where that proposed area is going to be. So will there be pedestrian access allowed?
Mr. Hale, do you want to comment on that, whether there'll be pedestrian access along that emergency access?
No. No, it's an easement, so we don't own the fee, but we have a recorded easement, and the easement is for emergency access and utilities. So in an emergency, which is unlikely, you know, if people needed to use it to walk out, of course they could, but it's an emergency access.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be concerned about like droves of people walking in and out there, especially during events and such. And since I mean, I come up and down that street multiple times a day, and that corner, to me, I always take it easy around there for the purpose that it's a dangerous corner.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it is gated, and you know, other than the management company, the police and fire are the only people that will have the key.
Well, okay. Well, I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and then also as you come down Summer Street towards your main entrance, yeah, you'll have to make a left turn into the development. I think that's going to cause a serious problem, especially like I live on a cul-de-sac. There's 9 homes here, and the amount of Amazon, UPS, FedEx trucks that come here during the day is like unbelievable. And I could just imagine how many cars are going to be turning left into that place. Is there going to be a way that you can manage that?
Does somebody want, Mr. Hale, do you want to talk about, we've talked about the traffic entering, do you want to answer?
Yes, so we, Mr. Chairman, you know, as you know, we did produce a traffic study which has been peer-reviewed. And I think we've discussed it at several hearings.
Right, and I actually agree with you that we've gone over that, and although there's still concerns, you know, as far as the train tracks, vehicles turning and this and that, but when they did the traffic study, the traffic engineers said that it met the standards. So, okay. John,
I think there's going to be a real problem with the number of people that's going to be going on. So I just wanted to bring that as a concern for the neighborhood, and if there's something that could be done about that in the future, or widening the road, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I also
go ahead.
I'd like to know, like, the number of stories, like how many stories are the apartment buildings? The 6 stories, is that correct?
Neil, are they 6 stories at this point?
Yes.
I mean, why is that allowed? This neighborhood, everything is 2 stories, 3 stories max. Even, I think in most of the town. So, I don't know. Is it going to be like Twin Rivers when we look out our window? I'm not sure. How is it going to be site-wise?
So one of the things that I can tell you is that this isn't regular zoning for the town of Walpole. This is under Chapter 40B, which is about creating affordable housing. It's a state law. It is not something that the town of Walpole would normally probably, in fact, you wouldn't be allowed to build this in the neighborhood there under the town of Walpole zoning laws. But those are not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with Chapter 40B, so it's a different set of rules. And under that, the heights are allowed.
Shirley, I would suggest that he visit the town's website where we have all of the agendas. We have all the previous meetings that have been recorded on this, where we've covered a lot of these topics in great depth. And I would suggest we go to the next hand raise, which is Bill Hamilton. Amy, can you allow Bill Hamilton to speak, please?
Okay, before we get back to Mr. Hamilton, is there anybody else? Because we already spent over 6 minutes with Mr. Hamilton. Is there anybody else?
There are. So the next person's hand is Julie Laurie.
Okay, go ahead. Let's let Julie in, please.
All right, Julie, you're in.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Julie Laurie, I live on South Street in Walpole. I just want to follow up briefly with regards to Joanne Mulligan's points. More of a comment, possibly a question. I keep hearing everyone discuss whether it's Omni or our own peer reviewer talk about when you're looking at the contaminated land or possible contaminated land. It sounds to me everyone's relying on reports. And I guess my question and or concern is whether or not there's been actual testing in these areas. I also read through the phase 5 report, and similar to what Joanne was saying, there was a lot of like speculation or inconclusive words being used even in those reports. And so if you guys are relying on those reports as an indicator as to whether or not this land is contaminated, I mean, we're just dealing with paper. We're not dealing with the actual land. And so my question is, 1, has it been tested recently? 2, who did the testing? Is it the developer who absolutely wants their development to go in there? So I worry about quality and the areas that could have been picked out conveniently to find whether or not there's any contamination. And if our peer reviewer had their LSP do any testing. So I'm suggesting that if you guys are going to just rely on reports, that's not good enough. I just, under these circumstances, it's not good enough. I don't know who wants to speak to that, but that's my concern.
Okay, I'll just address the way, if you have a site that has no history of industrial use or contamination, which from what we understand, that's what this site is. This is not the other side of the railroad tracks, which used to be a industrial site. So we don't, it's not up to the zoning board, it's up to the applicant to determine if there's contamination out on what is now his property. So that's sort of where the zoning board would come on this. And Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it pretty accurately. There's no suggestion from the information that we reviewed that there's likely to be contamination on this site. I don't know if the applicant's done testing. We certainly haven't done any testing to confirm that. I'd have to defer to David.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did testing. We did not agree to buy this land until we hired an LSP to do soil and water testing. And his recommendation was that we go ahead and buy the land. He thought the risk of contamination, and he examined all of the state records, building department records. There was no industrial history, and we did testing. And I would not have bought the property or proposed putting housing here. It's just too big of a liability. So you do your due diligence before you buy, and we did that.
Okay.
Chairman, that's absolutely consistent with what our expectations would be. If the applicant bought land and didn't test it, they're on the hook for any environmental remediation as the owner. They're the potentially responsible party. So if they take ownership of a land that has environmental issue, they're part of the responsibility. They have part of the responsibility for cleaning it up. So in today's environment, usually transactions on land don't happen unless there's a clean environmental sign off from a licensed site professional.
Okay, should we go on to the next comment? I believe Kate Fargo has her hand raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kate. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mean, we've brought this up a bunch of times, and other people have mentioned it already as well. But I just want to make it known. So I'm right across the street on the lovely corner everyone keeps referencing from the second entrance. So I just want to make it known. I did forward an email out earlier in the week. But there were 2 accidents this week, in the past 2 weeks really, on this corner, where this corner was pretty much closed for, we'll say, 5 to 6 hours total in the past 2 weeks. One accident was a little bit up the corner, flipped over a car. The second accident was with a snowstorm, which happens pretty much almost every snowstorm. It did involve 3 cars, but then as that accident was on the scene, people coming down the corner continued to kind of it was almost like bowling. They just kept sliding into each other. So all I can think about is putting gates and putting objects on this corner is just going to make this corner even more risky and even more deadly than it could potentially already be. And then what's the plan for what if that emergency exit is closed and there's an emergency and something happens? I just really think it should be rethought out where this emergency exit is.
Okay.
Okay. So the next hand raised is Erica Burden.
Hi everybody, I'm Erica Burden. I live at 1915 Washington Street, and I just wanted to make a brief comment. I know we've talked a bunch about traffic and density, and it sounded like Sean Reardon made a comment earlier that he's not concerned about density because there is now an emergency access road. And, you know, maybe I misunderstood that comment, but I just want to say that the emergency access road is just not good enough. And I think Julie said it best. It's not good enough. And it's not good enough for the residents of South Walpole that live here now and know what goes on down here. Traffic studies were done. They were never done during stadium events. And that's a big part of South Walpole. You don't move to South Walpole without knowing, you know, what the traffic is like down here during stadium events. And I don't even know if they know what our peak hours are, because the last time I looked at the traffic reports, I believe the hours that they said were peak were, you know, traditional, maybe leaving for work hours. I can't remember exactly what, but we have more than a few peak hours here. Like Boyden School pickup is our peak hour. And last time we were presented with an intersection with a traffic light, and I feel like that's not going to help. You're not mitigating, you're not minimizing the traffic. You're just pushing it around. With 300 units, that's still a lot of cars. And there's one way in and there's one way out, and people aren't using the emergency access road. There are 691 parking spaces in this complex. That is a lot of cars coming in and out. So I don't know, maybe Sean Reardon doesn't find this concerning, but the hundreds of people that live here do. And they might not be on the meeting tonight, but I speak on behalf of a lot of people who live here, and it's not good enough. It's too big. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica.
Okay, Mark Major.
Hi, Mark Major. I live on 11 Summer Street, and I think this has been beat to death, but I would like to echo a lot of what Erica just said around the traffic. The studies that showed that this was going to be acceptable based on other standards are not comparing that to the way life is today. And I think that's a huge factor, because this is going to make Summer Street a parking lot, probably for half of the daylight. And it's going to be a nightmare to live on that street. And this is going to affect current residents just as much as it affects future residents of this oversized development. This is just too big. It's not the right location for this. And if we can't find a way to stop this from happening in the way that it's currently proposed, then there 100% has to be another access point that is used that connects to 1A, or we need to build another access road to Route 1 that's not Water Street, Neponset Street. It's just not going to work. It's going to literally, it will make life in this neighborhood unmanageable. And those 100% need to be part of the conditions if you decide to go through and approve this the way it is. And to be honest, it's just not. It's way too big for this neighborhood. It's gonna be the eyesore. It's going to destroy this neighborhood. I'm not sure how David Hale can sleep at night knowing that he's ruining neighborhoods like this and using statutes like 40B that were designed for good for the profits of his company. But it's just not acceptable. So I hope you take that into consideration. And Summer Street can't hold that much traffic. It just can't. I don't care how many studies you do. I see it every day. It's going to be a parking lot up and down Summer Street all day long if you put that huge development in that spot. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Up next is Rosemary. Rosemary, you should be able to talk now.
Hi, Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to just try to be quick, but everything that everybody from Joanne to Julie to Erica to Mark right there have said perfectly. The contamination issue is just a huge issue in everybody in South Walpole's mind. It was brought to our attention that Tetra Tech has been sued for hiding contamination, which is very concerning to us. We want to just make sure that the right testing was done. And like, Julie had said, it's on paper. And somebody has to be held accountable. God forbid that there is. And I know that everybody keeps saying it's on the other side of the tracks. It's on the other side of the tracks. But when something like that seeps so far into the ground, it's moving. It's moving. And it's a huge concern for people in this area. And I feel like the fact that now people are seeing lawsuits against Tetra Tech for hiding.
Rosemary, not to interrupt you, but to be clear, this Tetra Tech has no association with the lawsuits that you're referring to.
Okay, that's fine, but
yep.
There's
So
people
just
in the area
wanted to clarify that.
Okay, well, people Google the name and they see that, so that's where we're at with that. The whole, that just has to be, it's a major thing, and it can't just be like, wash your hands of it. The other thing is like the accident. Like, My husband and my son literally couldn't even get home on Sunday. We're on Eldor because the road was completely shut down. So they had to go up Route 1 all the way down by Lafayette House, down by Four Kicks, down 1A to get home. So if there's a real emergency in there, it's really concerning for the police and fire how they're going to get there. Or if, you know, God forbid something major happens there, police and fire can't get to any of the streets that are up this way. That's a big deal. So that whole area right there with the accidents is really concerning.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Up next, Chairman Lee, we have Julie Laurie, who spoke earlier, and then that's the last hand raised that I see.
Okay, hi. I wasn't done, so I apologize. I don't know how I got cut off, but just my last point that I was going to make or ask after learning that there was actual testing done was a request, and if it's available already, and I didn't know that, that's fine, but I'm wondering whether or not the reports of the testing that was done, are those available to the public or available to the zoning board?
I can answer that. So on the town website, we have all of the reports. We have phase 1 environmental assessment. We also have the letter that kind of summarizes that. There's the subsurface investigation that was done. Those are all on the town website. And if you need a link, I'm happy to send that to you.
No, so just to be clear, you're saying that the testing that was done by Omni prior to purchasing land from Baker Hughes is on the website? So they said that they had testing done of the soil. That soil testing is posted?
Yep, it is. Oh. And I will actually drop a link to that in the chat so everyone can pull it up if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I want to just clarify that Mr. Hale is, do we have your LSP report from your purchase?
Mr. Chairman, the town has had that for a year and a half now. So it was provided to the town during the site approval process. It also went to Mass Housing and it was reviewed by Mass Housing. You know, this is a clean site.
No, I think that's great that you've provided that because we want to be as transparent as possible. So thank you for providing that to the board, and anything that goes to the board goes to the public. So
yeah,
for everybody, it's out there. They can take a look at it and see exactly what you've seen, Mr. Hale. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Hale a quick question about, was he planning to have an LSP on site during construction?
No. So we will follow all of the regulations that we're required to follow, and those regulations require that if one of our subcontractors were to find something, they need to notify DEP and go through all of the regulations, and there's a lot of them. And it's not just me and my company. The general contractor has liability too, and everyone on the site takes all of this extremely seriously.
I understand. Thank you. Mr. Reardon, would it be your recommendation to have an LSP on site during construction?
Sorry about that. I don't think there's any need for that. I really don't expect anything to happen. And if something does occur, there's clear regulations in place for how the construction team would have to handle that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I might point out that this is an area where the town has absolutely no jurisdiction. I mean, we when we develop this, are subject to lots and lots of regulations, but not by the town, and you know, so we haven't asked for any waiver. But we are highly regulated, just not by the town.
No, and those would all be state regulations, so I understand that. Okay. Okay, Ashley, do we have anybody else that wants to comment on this? Because we still have more to go tonight. We're going to switch over and talk about, or let the public comment on the Walpole Common redesign area.
Yeah, so I believe we have one more hand raised, and at your previous hearing on this, you took a pretty a substantial amount of public comment on the traffic. So right now there's one hand raised. Cosellis, who I believe spoke earlier.
Hi everyone, my name is Cosellis and I live at 20 Lasivita Drive here in Walpole. I just have to say, I really do. I can't keep my mouth shut anymore. I have to comment on this monstrosity of a site. 1 year ago, we were at the Boyden Elementary School discussing this, actually over a year ago, a year and a half ago. And at that point, we were told it was possibly 200 units. We're switched again to 400 units, went back again now to 300 units. I just can't understand why our town officials can't help us with something that we're saying. It's so problematic in so many ways that why we aren't able to downsize some of this project to, one, fit with the neighborhood, two, fit with the traffic, three, fit with the safety, and four, the environmental concerns. I mean, this is beyond any sort of, I'm devastated that our town officials have not been able to support this project because what? Because it is a 40B housing, and because we're looking at the state funding part of this as well. This is absolutely ridiculous. The town, we are residents of this town. We have a right in what's being built in our backyards. This is absolutely unnecessary to be such a large project. I would really appreciate the zoning board, every member of the zoning board. I know you've been very helpful in all of this process, and you've heard all of us from South Walpole. We've created a Save South Walpole site that I'm not sure that you're all aware of. However, we are just a small portion of people representing hundreds and hundreds of other people, thousands of other people. And this to us is a complete and utter monstrosity that needed to be downsized from the very beginning. And I would really appreciate some more consideration into this. The size of the buildings is unbelievable. The size and thinking that all of these cars come in here. The accident that Kate Fargo commented on was our neighbor's son. His car spun around. He was then hit by another oncoming car around that corner because that car couldn't see. So not only did his car spin around, he was then hit head on again. That road was closed for 6 hours this past Sunday afternoon. If you think that if there's an emergency there and vehicles are going to be able to get in, they're absolutely not going to be able to get in there. What if another accident was to happen over by the train tracks? Let's give this a little bit more thought, please, and have some other exit points. It's not a bad idea to create something out to 1A to sort of get that traffic out of that area. Another entrance and exiting point if possible. I appreciate this. I appreciate all the work that you've done, but really, I feel like there still needs to be some more work done before anything is approved. Thank you.
Hi, Charlie. We have two hands up now. Bill Hamilton, who I believe has spoken twice this evening, and Becky Littbeck.
Yeah, go ahead with Becky, and then we'll get to Mr. Hamilton. He's already spoken once.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time, like always. So we're talking about traffic now, right? Because I don't want to jump ahead or talk about something we're not. But is it okay for me to just mention something about it?
Well, we're talking about the main development site. Yeah, so.
Well, because you said the Walpole comment and like the.
We're going to get to that, and we'll pull that up on the screen. But do you want to talk about the main development site on Summer Street?
I'll wait until we get into the next part. I didn't want to misspeak. That's why I was asking. Okay, so I'll wait to the next section.
Okay. We can take Mr. Hamilton now.
Yes. I had some questions, and I guess my 6 minutes was up. But number one, the people who I talked to on the Conservation Commission, I joined the Conservation Commission in '75. We knew that illegal dumping was going on then, and Bird Machine had nothing to do with it. but their property was accessible, and there were trucks that I understand did make it across the tracks and do illegal dumping. And when the fire was at Bird Machine, there were people there that talked about the illegal dumping. You're not going to find that in any records. You're going to have to do a 21E to find that. And I hope a 21E was done or requested, because it should be found. Now, back to the train tracks. No decision should be made until we know what the MBTA is going to do with that crossing. That crossing right now is very dangerous. The traffic study was silent on it. That's a blind intersection if you're traveling east. Now, I submitted a public comment letter. Is it in the file yet? I submitted it last night.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, so then I won't go into any detail because it's all in that letter. So, until we know what the MBTA is going to do. Now, the fourth problem with that site, the CSX dealt with 3 safety problems that they couldn't correct. And there's a new one, and that's the electromagnetic device, which can turn off all safety measures at the intersection. And we know that a train went through there without activating the safety measures. But now, I would like to know what their plan is. Now, CSX had A, B, C. They were going to try to do 4 quad gates. They couldn't do it. They were going to try to do maybe block the intersection, make Summer Street one way in each direction. That was not feasible for them. They left. They chose part B, which was leave the intersection, abandon it. Now, I don't know if the MBTA is ready to do that, but they should be, because this is such a dangerous intersection. And the last thing I like to say is that I know that, and I believe that Mr. Mackey was talking about the Walpole Water Resource Protection District, treating it as a local zoning. Now, I did talk to Gregor McGregor a while back, and he said it's not local zoning and it shouldn't be considered local zoning. And if it's not local zoning, then 15% impervious. I don't believe the state allows special permits. The town does in our zoning, but I don't believe the state does. But Gregor McGregor is now working for people in North Walpole, so I might be able to get a hold of him again. And I believe Mr. Mackey may be speaking from what he knows. If he believes that this is local zoning, he's correct. But if it's not local zoning, which I believe, then he is not. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Okay. Good. Ashley, can we switch over? Actually, any board members have any comments at this point? Okay. Good. Ashley, can we switch over to the proposed redesign of the Walpole Common, the South Walpole Common? And we were lucky enough to have Sean Reardon join us tonight. So we want to, if people have questions or comments about this, now's the chance. We went through this a lot at our last meeting, and we talked about the fact how the current situation has the traffic flow through the South Walpole Common area at a grade D, and this will raise it up. Sean, do you recall what level it will raise it up to? You're on mute.
Sorry. At the risk of misspeaking, I want to say that the signalized intersection was a B, but I'm not certain of that. But it was a substantial improvement.
Okay. So that being said, if we can, can we pull up that plan? Does somebody have access to that? There we go.
Oh yeah, Leslie's already on it.
So this is the plan. It's on the ZBA website, and one of the things that we've talked about is the concerns about traffic in the area. We've heard that numerous times even tonight before we got to this. So this is a proposal. Oftentimes on a project this scale, the developer pays for some of the costs of improving traffic in the area. So this is something that's been looked at. Traffic engineers have gone through this. There were a number of plans. We saw that they had plans for a rotary, and this is what's coming before the zoning board as a possibility to improve the traffic flow through South Walpole. At our last meeting, we heard a lot of comments about it, and we just want to give neighbors another chance to comment on this. And my request is, as you comment on this, please be specific, not just I don't like it or I love it or whatever. Explain why you have concerns about this, and then we'll take those into consideration. Okay, Ashley, do you have anything to add on this before we open it up to the public?
Sure. So that everyone is clear on what's happening here. So this is something that a lot of the department heads met. The applicant provided a few different scenarios, which included roundabouts of different shapes. And really, so we met with fire and police and engineering and building, and this solution had a lot of support from all of those departments. And there's some things about the setup that improve the current traffic conditions and also provide some flexibility for addressing events. So, for example, the light at this intersection would be able to be controlled by a police officer. So a police officer would be able to control, what the lights were doing so that they can move traffic as needed in response to events. We've received some feedback from neighbors, but not significant. They haven't seen the other options. So I just kind of wanted to make that portion of this clear, that this does provide some flexibility for the surges in traffic that this area sees.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Ashley.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead,
If
Tom.
I may. This is off-site mitigation, and clearly, as everybody can see, has to do with roadway improvements. So, at some point, the select board will have to get involved in this. This is as the road commissioners in town. So, if the ZBA does want to pursue this, there is still some more review to be done by the road commissioners.
Okay, and one of the things, I sort of like what you said, if the ZBA wants to pursue this, to be honest, the ZBA is only looking at this because we're trying to improve things in the whole area, recognizing that if this development is built, it's going to change, it's going to have an impact on traffic. It's going to have a significant impact on traffic. We know it. So the question is, what can we get out of it? And this is one of the things that we think might be an improvement for the town. So I say that, and we open it up to the public.
Okay, so the first person we have is Cosellis.
So unfortunately, you guys skipped over me the last time when I had my hand up. So this actually isn't about the traffic study right now, but I need to go back to something. Unfortunately, you didn't call on me when I had my hand raised again. But a huge concern that I have with this project as well is the housing that's going on in Walpole right now. What is the plan if this is not at capacity? What is the next plan to have people come in? I mean, I've seen billboards on Route 1 about Liberty Station and how they're looking to, give 2 months rent free if you sign a lease. What is, I'm not necessarily asking what their plan would be, what the developer's plan would be at that, but what is Walpole's plan at that point where nothing is really being filled in this area currently already between the Union and West apartments that I know are not even at 25% capacity. Liberty Station at Walpole Center is not even at 25% capacity. Not to mention the one that was over by Pennington Crossing. So what are we, Moose Hill is another one. What are we looking at here for numbers? Can we go back and address that, please?
I'm not sure what your question is. What is the question? Krista, can you state?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what is the actual question?
My question is, what is the capacity? I mean, honestly, if we're not able to fulfill other apartments in our area, what is the need for a project of this magnitude and size?
Shirley, if I could just add, so Krista, I'd be happy to talk to you about 40B and housing.
No, I understand the rules of 40B, Ashley.
Well,
I understand all of it.
Then what I'm asking is that the town is required to review these projects, and that the town itself doesn't get to regulate the local market for rentals or ownership units.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's important to note that the applicant has to go through mass housing, and they have to go through a project eligibility process before they can even come to the town. And unfortunately, the town has extremely limited input in that process. So going before mass housing, they ended up, this applicant for this project actually did get a project eligibility letter. So once that happens, as you know, the board is required to entertain the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Krista, does that, I don't see her on there. Does that answer your question? Can you bring her back? Krista, you heard the town council explain that because the developer has a letter of eligibility for mass housing, that is why we're here, and the applicant can propose the project that they're proposing.
I understand. So just like the Preserve and all of these other apartment housing projects, we could potentially look at, huge amounts of vacancy in a project that's so massive, and the town is okay with doing something like that. I would just reconsider to maybe downsize this project a little bit again, and to look at, what sort of structures that you're putting in an area. It's an eyesore. It doesn't go there. It does not fit our neighborhood. And I'm sad that everyone thinks that it's okay to put it here. Obviously, I don't think all of the people that are on this call live in the area.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, Ashley, who do we have for discussing the...
So next we have Becky Litvack.
Hello, thank you. So on this topic in particular, I live at 1925 Washington Street Extension, so that little dead end to the left of the screen. My concern with this, and I do see that there's parts of it that could definitely be beneficial. I actually spoke to Chief Carmichael after the last ZBA meeting when this was proposed, and he even said that he had not spoken to the residents to receive their feedback. So I know that in the beginning of this, it was stated that the Walpole PD was all for it, but just to note that there's still questions or still concerns from the residents. So where I live, it is a dead end. I can only get out onto that main street right there, right at the worst spot of it, that little bend there where it's like a blind spot. So I guess my concern with putting a traffic light there is when all that traffic is then backed up around that corner, I feel as though it's going to be impossible for me to ever drive straight or to get out of this, in and out of the street again. Like, I don't see how, my apologies, but it's been a long day, but I don't see how this is going to help. I feel like this traffic light right there is going to be more of a hindrance. I know you're talking about the police will have access to help it during stadium events, but I'm just talking day to day, especially during the Boyden pickup, which we've all said, and I've sent you pictures on how backed up that is. I just don't see how a traffic light there is going to be helpful. I see it more as a hindrance to getting in and out of this street. And I just want to make sure that you take into consideration the houses that live down here. I really worry about the access. Like, obviously coming out, taking a right and going to Route 1, I don't think that will be too affected. Although, I mean, I don't know with the traffic coming down from Washington, but I don't see how it's going to be feasible for me to get out and go straight to Boyden, and going past there. I just worry about that. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that or can speak to what the traffic would look like on that side of things, but that's just one concern I have from living in that street. And I do just worry, again, with the density of the project, which you've heard me say and read my letters 1,000 times. We're not talking about 300 cars. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of cars and hundreds of people. You're just talking 300 units. And I feel like a lot of times we think 300 units and we get stuck on the number 300, but it's hundreds of people and hundreds of foot traffic and hundreds of cars added to this. And a traffic light there, I just see as gridlock. And I hope I'm wrong, but that is my fear in that section.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have Erica Burden.
Hi, Erica Burden again. I also live on Washington Street Extension. I have several concerns and comments, and some of them I might have questions that might need to be answered. But I do want to say that I also reached out to Chief Carmichael after the last meeting about this traffic intersection proposal. And what I was told was that, you know, these departments, fire and police, were presented with only a few options and they had to pick one. So I find it hard to believe that they were necessarily supportive.
It is. There's a lot of people with their hands raised. Oops, sorry.
Sorry. So I don't know if it was that they were actually supportive of this intersection or that they were only given 3 options and they just picked the one that was, you know, that wasn't the worst, which isn't ideal either. So another comment that I have was when this traffic flow study was done, it was over Christmas vacation week. I don't know why it was chosen to be done that week when school traffic isn't on this street, but I don't find it very smart to do a traffic study when school isn't in session. I don't know how you can assess traffic flow when there's not normal traffic in this area. The other question I have is that, so obviously Boyden school pickup is a peak time in South Walpole for traffic. Cars line up at Boyden and the cars extend all the way down Washington Street, all the way to Washington Street Extension. The past few weeks, traffic has been pretty heavy and cars have been parking on Washington Street Extension because Water Street is so backed up. So my question is, was this taken into account, the fact that now this intersection with the traffic light is going to have cars backed up, you know, in the middle of it, and it's going to be going from all sides because cars are going to be going down from Boyden to Summer Street and still trying to get to Boyden on the opposite side. I just feel like there's going to be cars backed up into the intersection where there's now going to be a traffic light with people stopped and kids trying to cross it. Was that taken into consideration when this was done?
Mr. Chairman, may I address that? This is Ken Cram from Bayside.
Go ahead, Mr. Cram.
Thank you. First off, we did our counts on 2 separate occasions, and they were not done over Christmas break. They were done back in September and November 2019, even before the pandemic. Secondly, this 5 options were presented at our initial meeting with department heads, and this was the preferred option of all 5. We looked at on paper and chicken scratches several other options, but they all had various issues which we could not resolve appropriately, so we got rid of those. In terms of Washington Street Extension, we would probably do something there to artificially create gaps such that the queues don't block those those people that want to get into the traffic stream if they want to go down to Washington Street. Yeah, as for the Boyden School, I'm sure that that'll have to be worked out as well. Again, this is our like a preliminary 25% plan. There are, still some details that have to be worked out, but conceptually, and based on our analyses, this plan will work. It will be an improvement over what's existing in terms of evaluating the levels of service. And earlier, Sean was correct. It is level service B under both future build conditions with the project. So we think this is a good option to move forward with. It also solves a couple of issues with, roadways and sidewalks being on private property and getting them back onto the town lane.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cram. And can you tell, do you know what the current level of service is? You said this design brings it to a B. Do you know what the current level of service is?
Yes, the current level of service would be an unsupervised level of service at a couple of the triangle intersections. And I won't go into my previous discussion about the level of service because that's already on the record.
You broke up a little bit when you gave the actual grade. Can you say that again?
A couple of the intersections at the unsignalized intersections formed by the current triangle are operating at level service F under future build conditions with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next is Joanne Mulligan.
I'm back. I just want to say one thing about the traffic. I think that intersection needs help, regardless of Omni coming in, but obviously with more cars, it's way worse. But I can't tell you how many people as an RTM I've heard from about the traffic light, and they are all against it. I haven't talked to anyone who's even remotely for it. I was the one who actually talked to Chief Carmichael, and he said to me, I feel awful that I hope it's okay I'm saying this, I should have gotten the residents involved. So I guess I would just ask that some residents are involved who would represent the people in South Walpole. It's a historic town common, and a traffic light doesn't fit into that kind of scenery. So I have kind of different ideas in my head. Like, I think it needs a four-way stop near Washington Extension. I realize totally, I'm always on that street going by Boyden. It's horrible, horrible. People are getting hit. Their, mirrors are getting taken off, and it's just a matter of time till someone gets hurt. So Boyden has to definitely have something, and, a reworking. But people were really upset about the relocating of the common and having the green area in front of on Neponset Street, where there's actually like a couple of apartment buildings in homes, feeling like we wouldn't all enjoy it. It would more be like their front yard, as you can kind of see in the picture. So I just think, the light and the moving of the common really raised a ruckus with people. Hopefully I hate that there's already work that's been done, but hopefully the town can get some of the citizens down here involved. And Mr. Hale, can we please downsize the project? You've been like the last person in many, probably 30 years at least, of people with things that South Walpole's had to fight that are pretty large. Casino, train, obviously we got the train, sludge dump. You're in an unenviable position, unfortunately. It's the complex is way too big. It's bigger than the amount of people in South Walpole. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I add something real quick?
Sure, go ahead, Sean.
So I just want people to understand that this is like a pre-concept sketch meant to just test how it would perform. So this design has to go through a public process with the town and through the DPW through various phases of design. It could look very different it could have a geometry very different. The road could take a different angle, but it would still function essentially as a T intersection under signal control. So I just want people to understand that this is not necessarily the exact geometry of the roadway. There are a lot of options, including where that green space is, but the way it would function and the way it would perform would be pretty much the same. So I just want to make sure people understand that this is not necessarily the design. It's what we modeled so that we could evaluate how it would perform.
Okay, so next is Mark Major.
I just want to make a couple comments about this. I mean, overall, I can certainly appreciate the intersection today is not super functional. It's very historic and it's got a lot of character, and that certainly is something to consider before we decide to change all this. But I think my biggest concern is the removal of the stop signs. To be honest, it's the one thing today that keeps people from barreling down Summer Street at 40, 50 miles an hour sometimes. And they would be coming right into that intersection, which, you know, that's right past my house. There's other houses there with small children, and I just have a lot of concerns with removing those stop signs today. It also creates a blind intersection for folks that are coming down Washington Street and turning right onto Summer Street, or and folks coming down Summer Street that would try to turn a left onto Neponset Street. There's no signage there. There's no stop sign, so that could definitely create accidents. I don't think that's been fully thought through, and as people start to cut through Neponset Street and Willow Street to prevent the backup of the traffic light, you're going to start to see that more and more happening. So definitely things to consider as we do this. But we'll need some sort of remediation for speed. Otherwise, people are going to be turning left onto Summer Street, and they're going to go full blaze down Summer Street. And that's where there's it's a blind turn there that turns onto Summer Street. Today we have the stop signs which stop that speed, and if you pull those, that's a real problem. So that should absolutely be considered before we go forward. Thanks.
Okay, so next is Robert Belcher.
Good evening. Thank you. So in looking at this design, I had two questions. One is the traffic coming from Summer Street would be allowed to do a right turn on red if they were headed toward Route 1?
I don't think we've got to that level of detail on this. So, like in the center of town, there's signs that say no turn on red. So we're not at that level of detail on this traffic proposal. And as it's already been stated, this still is going to have to go to the selectmen for hearings and DPW. So this is more trying to get the developer to pay for some improvements if the project goes forward. And we all recognize that the traffic in South Walpole is not good. You've all said that. I've seen it, So the question is, what do we want to do about it? To be honest, the easiest thing for the zoning board to do would just be to say, step back and do nothing. But this is because we're looking at the entire site and what it's going to have for an impact in the area.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My next question is, so it's the grade of the intersection is going to assure that the traffic backed up on Summer Street would never reach the railway?
Mr. Chairman, may I address that for you?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, the projected queues based on the signal timing that we have in this preliminary model will just back up under the 95th percentile condition to just as far as Neponset Street.
Okay, I understand that. I find that hard to believe with the number of cars that come through that intersection, but if we're in a preliminary stage, I think that needs to be looked at closer. And then I'd just like to reiterate Mark's comment that people are going to bypass the traffic signal and go down to Ponset Street and Willow Street to Washington Street. And that's not the best corner if you're on Willow Street trying to get to Washington Street. And I would envision with Boyden School there and people trying to cross Washington Street headed toward town, that would be a problem. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Okay, so next is Bill Hamilton.
Yes, my question, I'm not in favor or against this, but I believe there are people who want to see some improvements there. My concern is with the intersection down center of town that is not going to be done now, it appears, because Pennington Junction wouldn't fix that intersection until all 4 buildings were built. 2 have been built and a 3rd is planned, but there's talk now that the 4th building is not going to be built and the intersection that they promised is not going to be built. Is it possible to have an escrow account to fix this intersection so that the money would be there and it could be done after the project may not be finished or after the project is closed?
So, Mr. Hamilton, that is the kind of condition that the zoning board would put in, that it would not be, we could put in anything. We could put it in when the project is complete, or we could put it in before any work starts. So I think that's a valid point about Pennington, and I wasn't aware that the 4th building was not going to be built, as you said. So that's news to me.
Well, it was projected.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, and I hope that explains how we can condition something like this. Okay. Amy, who else do we have?
So next we have John Cosellis.
Good evening. Can you hear me again? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, John. Go ahead. Go ahead. Did we lose Mr. Cosellis?
I think we might have.
Okay. See if you can bring him back in.
There
Hello?
you go. He's back.
I'm back. You can hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I'm just stating my ground that I'm against changing the intersection, completely opposed to it. I urge all my neighbors to act the same way. And I also urge Omni to hear our calls as a neighborhood. We're a neighborhood. You could see we're together. Bring your numbers down and let's work this together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Cosellis.
So next we have Erica Burden.
Hi, everybody. I wasn't done speaking before. I don't know why I was cut off, but I have just a few more comments about the intersection. So over Christmas vacation week, Bayside Engineering was in this neighborhood and literally standing on my front lawn doing an analysis. And I asked what they were doing there, and they said they were trying to do more research to see if they could redesign the intersection. So when I said Christmas vacation week, that is what I was referring to. I know that the traffic studies were done 2 times at previous times because I have read those, but they were here as well over Christmas vacation week. So I think the problem is that a lot of the residents are seeing now is obviously this intersection is terrible. We all know that. It's horrendous the way that it is. However, adding this complex in this size, okay, it has 691 parking spots. There might be 691 cars that could be coming in and out of that one road onto Summer Street. I don't see this mitigating that traffic. I just, maybe the experts raise this to a B. Maybe it would be a B now with the traffic that's here now, but a lot of us are not understanding how this is going to be better when double the size of South Walpole is here. And again, nobody has addressed, you know, I think it was said that traffic wouldn't be backed up to the train track. If you've been here, like on any day, especially with school, traffic is going to be backed up to the train track, especially if there's a light. So, you know, maybe I'm not an expert here. I live here and I see what goes on. I've sent zoning board pictures, picture after picture. So it's not, you know, we're not exaggerating here. This is the truth. This is the reality. And I think where a lot of us are at now is that the great part about South Walpole is that it's very historic. And we love the common, and Boyden School does projects on that common, and it may seem insignificant to other people, but it's not to the people that live here, and it's not insignificant to the kids, and it's not going to be insignificant to anyone that lives at that complex. So I would rather them not rip up the South Walpole Common. If this is what we're going to get, if it's going to look like this, I would rather them just leave it as is, because I don't see it getting any better with the amount of cars and the amount of units that are going to be going in here. I would rather keep the South Walpole Common the way that it is. And I think a lot of people feel the same. So thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Chairman, may I address her first comment?
Sure, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Cram.
Now that she explained what happened, yes, our surveyor was out there several times since Christmas, picking up additional survey information for future potential redesign of the intersection, because we realized we need to extend the limits of our survey. That's why he was out there.
Okay, and that's great. I'm glad to see that you weren't just working off of aerial photos like we are at this point. So thank you, Mr. Cram, and thank you for your worker for being out there at that time. Okay.
Okay, next we have Joanne Mulligan.
Chairman Lee, I just was wanted to finish up this comment. Is similar to what Mr. Hamilton said. Yeah, if we could get some of this, if we do change the intersection, if we could make it a condition that we get some resources from the applicant to help pay for that, I think that would be a good condition to add on, since the traffic is going to obviously become so much worse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and next we have Julie Lowry.
Hello. So I don't want to belabor any of the points that were already made, because it sounds like there'd be further hearings and discussion before something like this would actually happen. But I do, number one, want to say I think it's a good idea to plan for a future design, something a lot better than this, in support of Mr. Hamilton's suggestion with regards to getting something in escrow to do that in the future. I think it would be a horrible idea to marry this design at this point in time, because the logistics and the reality of how much traffic will still be in that area, I think remains to be seen. So I don't think we should marry this idea. One of the issues I still see is with turning Summer Street and getting rid of a stop sign at the end of it. That's definitely a concern with regards to the speed and the traffic flow. But also, you're now taking access away from the flow of that traffic that would just go right up onto Water Street. And I think it would actually cause more traffic. I just can't see how this would actually work out. But knowing that this would have to be looked at closer, and it's something that could be discussed in the future, that would be great, because my concern has always been backing up onto the train tracks. And so even if you put a stop sign at the end of Summer Street where there currently is one, this design shows that it's been taken away. If you have a stop sign there, which I think is necessary, and then you take the right-hand turn towards the light, you're gonna increase the chance of backing it up even more by not allowing that traffic to take the right to go towards Route 1. So that's a huge safety issue once again. I think the underlying issue here has been heard over and over, that this development's too big. I don't know how many different traffic designs or studies rather you can do that's going to alleviate the size of the development. And the answer to that, we all know, is nothing. You're not going to be able to relieve the issues unless you downsize this project, and that should be a condition. Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Cosellis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for hearing some of my concerns. So I just want to reiterate exactly what Erica had said. It actually is a historical component to our South Walpole neighborhood. The Common has supported many different aspects, both at the Boyden Elementary School and also just the significance of several national holidays throughout the year. And it's not something we want to see go away. I can't understand why paving right through it would cause us to, all of a sudden have this miraculous way of, cars going back and forth, and it would, help to alleviate some of the traffic. I see this as creating more traffic in that area. So for instance, when my kids were in third grade at the Boyden Elementary School, and I still have a little guy who will be in third grade next year, there is a teacher who's been there for years, Mrs. Galvin, and she takes her class twice a year, and they go out to the South Walpole Common, and in the fall they plant mums, and in the spring they plant impatiens in the area, or geraniums. And it's one of those, it's one of those rite of passage, but also historical ways that the kids are learning to give back to their community. And when you drive past it every day, they say, oh, look, I think the plant that I did is, the plant that I planted in the ground is growing now. But it's not just that. It's just looking at it and paving right through it. I just don't feel that it's the solution. I can't tell you, I go through this intersection, probably at least 10, 20 times a day, as I'm going back and forth to every school, Boyden, Bird, and the high school, and back and forth for all three of my kids. And there are numerous times where it's very tricky going through there. Unfortunately, the traffic is the traffic. And before we lived on La Civita Drive, we lived on Washington Street. And at the end there at Washington Street, before you go to either Water or Washington Street Extension, there wasn't even a stop sign there. So that helped to alleviate some of that years later. But putting a road directly into the Common and trying to create some sort of, traffic flow in that area, I don't see that this is the plan. Because if I was coming from Route 1 and coming down Water Street and turning onto Washington Street and not under, I would hope that there would be signs prior to knowing that you could take a left turn there, or that stop, if that's a traffic light, right after Water Street in front of the church, as we can see, if that's a traffic light, you're literally coming around that corner and stopping. Where's your sight line to see that? I mean, I know myself, if I'm turning down there, I can't see what's ahead of me at that corner. It's the same sort of issue that we're talking about on Summer Street. There are some blind areas in that area. And I really feel that this is not going to solve our problem. So if we're talking about this traffic study per se and this design of a traffic study, this one's really not going to cut it for the area. And I appreciate your time tonight. And I know you guys have a lot to think of, but please think of the people who live in this area and who go through this intersection every single day, several and multiple times a day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Amy, who's next?
As of the second, we do not have any other hands raised.
Okay. So at this point, I think what I'd like to do is come up with a date for continuing this until, and one of the things that we want to have is comments from the fire department. This is from our earlier work tonight on the actual site development. So we wanted to have comments from the fire department and...
So Chair Lee, my understanding is that we have an extension until tomorrow on this project.
And so what do you,
So I think we need to, I think that we need to discuss with the applicant kind of, my understanding is that they are looking to close the hearing.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We're couple weeks short of a year since the first hearing, and a year and a half since the first presentation. I think if we're going to keep the hearing open, it needs to have, we need to be discussing a draft decision and, you know, have an end date in sight that's very near.
I totally agree. So, but what we recognize tonight is we still have peer review to finish off on comments and also get the final letter from the fire department. We've talked with the neighbors. We understand concerns about the intersection design here. This is not something, as we've already said, the intersection isn't something that's going to get resolved by the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's not what this is about. What it is about is what we're going to ask you to pay for on an intersection design, Mr. Hale. So I do think we are getting very close to concluding the public part of the hearing. But I would recommend, or we also have town council here, maybe town council can recommend whether we should close it without having all the information in from both peer review and the fire department and anybody else that wants to get anything in at the last minute. Town council, do you want to give us your guidance?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have drafted a decision, done the facts and things like that, which is why I had all those, strange questions in the beginning. And so, but we don't have enough to finish the decision because we don't have, we're looking for, we're looking for some stormwater stuff from the peer review, but we're looking for the fire department. So if the hearing closed tonight, then we are all done. We cannot accept any information from anyone. So, any questions that we have cannot be answered unless they can be answered amongst your deliberations. That's all we have. So we would, if it closes tonight, we have 40 days to issue a decision, and that would probably entail, I would think, 2 meetings of deliberations. The problem is that, again, the deliberation is just going to be between us based on the information that we have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead,
I think we're amenable to an extension of, say, a week. I'm confident that in terms of the final comments from the fire department, the recent plans, the fire department has seen all of the changes that we've made. So it shouldn't take them a lot of time to make their final comments, and maybe Sean can tell us when he'll have his final report. In terms of stormwater, that also could be done as a condition, that it meets stormwater requirements. That's fairly common.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not comfortable with that because of conditioning certain maintenance and things like that.
So you still have concerns about the home ownership, homeowners association, and some of the details like that? I do. And I don't think a week will work. Unfortunately, next week is school vacation week. Not that I'm going anywhere, but I do have three kids that'll be home all the time, not on Zoom. So I agree. I'm not looking at a week. I think at a minimum, it's at least 2 weeks. That puts us out until the 24th. But I also recognize, Mr. Hale, we've been at this for a long time. And I did see a comment, I think it was from Joanne Mulligan, she popped it up, about Concom. That actually is separate from the issues that we're dealing with. So they can keep that hearing open. That is not something that is going to interfere with the zoning board's decision. Town council, am I correct on that?
Correct. And Concom has weighed in on the local bylaw and waivers with regard to that. The applicant has stayed out of the 25-foot no disturb. So right now, the Conservation Commission is reviewing the project based on the Wetland Protection Act.
So Charlie, it sounds like we might be able to, if Mr. Hill's amenable to granting a time extension, maybe to like March, or sorry, what month are we in? The 22nd of February, which is a Monday. The 24th of February is not a good day to continue to.
Okay.
We already have a very full ZBA agenda.
Okay. Can we get everything that we're going to need by the 22nd?
I believe so. And I mean, we'll certainly try, and if we don't have everything, then we'll need to request another time extension.
Okay. Town Council, do you think you can get your questions about the management and the Home Ownership Association? Do you think you can get those answered by then?
Sure, if I'm able to have a conversation with Phil, with Attorney Mackey, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, and then yeah, and as I go through, I write down questions so I can get those probably answered by Phil also.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak? This is Lou Levine. I try to get in before I'm the attorney for the applicant. I would be doing, not Phil, the business about the homeowners association. I'm happy if Amy has any questions to answer them. We've done this before, as David said, in other 40Bs, and I'm happy to answer them. I tried to speak before, but I couldn't get in when you were discussing this topic. I don't think it's an issue that would be a big issue that would delay the issuance or decision on a comprehensive permit. In fact, to save time, I will send Amy an email tomorrow describing how we would generally propose it in a more particular fashion than was discussed verbally at the meeting. So I'll get that to Amy within the next 48 hours. If she has any questions, she can reach out to me, but that will be resolved, except for the documents, obviously, well before the next meeting in concept. But I would suggest that you want to go for a couple of weeks with the understanding that we could see a copy of the draft decision, understanding that it's a draft decision and the board hasn't weighed in on it. So we would have the opportunity at the next meeting to be able to comment on the comments for the board's consideration. And if Tetra Tech could be finished by the next meeting, so that could get resolved. So we would be kind of at a juncture of moving forward, hopefully to close the hearing, or at least moving forward towards the finality. So that's my input. Thank you.
I think we'd certainly like to try, but just to be clear, Fire got these plans less than 2 weeks ago. So I will certainly reach out and try to get comments from them.
But again, Mr. Chairman, and again, the fire department can only do what they can do, and I appreciate that. But you know, in 2 more weeks, the fire department would have had the plans for a month. So again, they'll get to it when they get to it. But in fairness, in 2 more weeks, or in more than 2 weeks, as Ashley suggested, they'll have the documents, you know, for a month. And I don't want to misspeak, but I heard earlier that Tetra Tech and Katie had reviewed the revisions with the fire department, you know, when they were revising them or designing them. So assumedly they've met their criteria. I can't guarantee that, but I hope that. So if we could go, the date that Ashley suggested is acceptable, with the reasonable request that Tetra Tech, the fire department, and the draft decision could be supplied to the applicant or completed. Again, the draft decision wouldn't be completed, but at least supply to the applicant for the meeting, so the applicant would be in a position to comment on, you know, as opposed to seeing it for the first time, which should be difficult at the meeting.
Well, that's just a week then, because the 22nd's a Monday. So, I mean, you're still asking for me to draft a decision in a week. I mean, I have questions as to, you are, I think it's 55SS, you're 55SS LLC. There's property owned by Omni. There's also on the plans, it's written 55SSBH. I mean, I have a whole bunch of questions that I didn't want to bog down the public hearing with, that, you know, I need answers to, and I mean,
if I may, that those questions are all easily answered.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, Mr.
Send out an email and
I have a whole bunch.
Send out an email and we'll answer the questions.
But then I'll be spending my time drafting emails and not your decision. So I just, I mean, it's just, I think you need to be patient that if I do this, I mean, I'll get you a decision on maybe Friday the 19th, but it's
Amy,
not.
okay, let me ask you, Amy, how much time, what do you think is reasonable for getting together, answering the questions that need to be answered, and getting together a draft decision, and then even sharing it with the applicant, because that's not something I've done in the past, sharing it with the applicant. It's usually at the public hearing where they see it, and then we can discuss whether they want to close the hearing at that point. But I'll leave that to you, how you want to operate.
So, I mean, I'm fine with the 22nd. It's me getting that decision done ahead of time that you know, gives me hives, because,
Then we don't do the 22nd. What do you need to get the information so that we can have a good decision? You know, and I want to ask the applicant to give us an extension for that, because I'm using the key word, a good decision that's going to protect the town of Walpole, the developer, and the residents.
So right now I have the draft decision. It's, you know, it's one of my normal draft decisions. It's probably 30 pages. I need Sean to look at it. I need Ashley to take a look at it. I need Judy Barrett to take a look at it. They all have to weigh in, and Sean will probably be adding conditions in, you know, and then get it to the board. And at the, you know, if we do meet on the 22nd, it's a draft. So it's for the board to then give me input, and then for me to go back, you know, and the applicant to give input, and then for me to go back and reformulate and then provide you with a decision that you can vote on. And we also have waivers that have to be discussed that have not necessarily, while I understand that the waivers have been provided to us, we've had them, they were updated in November, the board has not yet gone through the waivers and, you know, addressed them. So, you know, that also is part of the decision, are the waivers.
Mr. Chairman, whatever time is reasonable, if Amy could provide it, that we could see a draft decision, understanding it's a draft decision and it's going to change, but obviously the input from Sean, Ashley, and Judy Barrett would be important prior to the, you know, seeing the draft decision. So when the draft decision is in a quasi-final draft decision, all the applicant is asking for an opportunity to review it so they could provide comments to any conditions in the decision for the board's consideration. So if somebody could provide us with a date, you know, if Amy can provide that, and again, whatever information, if she wants to call me or send me an email, all the things she mentioned, there are very simple, straightforward answers. But when can we get to see the draft decision? Again, understanding the board hasn't voted on it, okay, et cetera. You know, we just want to see it so we can. It's not uncommon to see draft decisions, you know, and 40Bs at all, so that the board can get the applicant's input and decide whether they're going to take the applicant's input or not, or, you know, revise the decision when the applicant, you know, gives a reason why a condition may be, inappropriate. That's all. Isn't, but it's always up to the board. We understand that. So.
And Mr. Levine, what I was talking about was doing it in the public session. So we would get the draft from town council, and then at that point we'd have the public hearing, and then you'd get the copy at that point, and then you can decide whether you want to make comments on it, or if you want to close, if you want to close the hearing, then that's when all input will end. And I don't think.
Mr. Chairman, a decision, it currently is a 30-page document. For us to get that at the hearing and expect to make comments on it seems unfair, number one. Number two, I think that we could be helpful to town council in making sure that the entities line up and those kind of things. I've actually never done one of these in any town where there wasn't some back and forth and cooperation between our council and town council. It just makes things go easier. It doesn't take any authority away from the board. It just makes it a more efficient process for everyone.
If you're extending cooperation, then March 1st would be great.
Okay, if we can see the draft decision, Amy, that's fine. Before the meeting.
Yeah, that I can do that. That's not a problem.
No problem, Amy. And if you have any,
if it's okay with the chairman.
Okay, board members, is that okay to continue until March 1st? That's a Monday.
Wait, we should try and have a meeting before that, right? To discuss. So we need to have a hearing where we discuss waivers.
Yeah, we need to do the waivers. Yep.
And a hearing to start discussing the draft decision. So I think that March 1st is a good time to extend to, but I think having a meeting, maybe we can get an extension to March 1st, but I think we should have at least one meeting the week of the 22nd.
Okay, we have a meeting on the 24th. It's a full schedule. The 22nd,
I know Judy Barrett is good on Mondays, which is why I referenced the Monday.
So if we were going to do the waivers on Monday the 22nd, maybe that would work. And Amy, you would still have time to work on the draft decision.
Sure. So I would hope we could also get input from the fire department and from Tetra Tech.
Yeah.
Yes, that I would hope to have that by March 22nd.
February
22nd.
Yes, sorry.
February 22nd.
Yes, shouldn't be a problem for us.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
I agree with Ashley that doesn't make sense to even complete a draft for Amy or anybody else until the board has indicated what they want to do in the waivers, because obviously that affects how the draft decision is drafted. So I would agree with Ashley. You should deal with the waivers first to allow the decision to reflect, your decision on the waivers. Otherwise, we're just going circular. So I would agree where we are right now. I think it makes sense. So if we can get the draft decision sometime after the meeting of the 22nd, but before the meeting of the 1st, that would work. And then we can decide on the 1st where we are.
Okay. I've got my calendar right here. I'm looking at it. So board members, you okay with that?
Yes.
Chair Lee, sorry, I know that we want to move on with this, but can I request that we have a 7:30 start time on February 22nd to accommodate some scheduling issues?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So 7:30, but we're complicating things because we're actually going to ask for an extension until the day after March 1st, which would be March 2nd, but we will have the next hearing on the 22nd. Do you follow that, Ashley?
I do, I think. I'm pretty sure.
I do.
Okay. Mr. Hale, you understand what we're trying to accomplish?
Yes, so I will provide a written extension tomorrow through March 2nd.
Okay. Okay. So.
Mr. Chairman, through you, can I ask Amy how she would like to get the questions answered? Either call me or send me an email. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, I'll send you an email, and then you can forward it if you need to forward it to engineers, etc.
Okay. Well,
And
I
then-
can answer the. Okay.
Yeah, well, no, I have other questions that are just questions on plans and things like that. And then I guess I would suggest that. Okay, that's fine. Well, we can talk on the 22nd further about the decision.
Okay. And, you know, Amy, I don't want to rush this. I want to do it, and I know you want to do it right, and we're going to do it once. And, you know, if you need more time, now's the time to say it.
No, I'm concerned about the waivers, but if we're going to talk about those on the 22nd, then I'm fine.
We'll do the
Okay.
waivers on the 22nd.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, at the request of the applicant, I'd like to continue this. We'll keep this case open until March 2nd. And could I have a motion to that effect?
A motion to continue to the 22nd to 7:30?
Well, we're gonna keep it open, no, because we're gonna continue it until February 22nd. That will be our next hearing. So,
At 7:30. So
I think that's the only motion that you need to make. I don't think you need to.
Okay, I'm.
Agreed.
Okay, so the applicant has already agreed that he's going to extend until March 2nd. So the only thing that we're going to do is we're going to have our next hearing for this on February 22nd at 7:30. At 7:30. But I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Moved by Suzanne, second by Jane. Any further discussion? Bob, you've been quiet this evening. How are you?
Great. Soaking it all in.
Okay. This has to be a roll call vote. Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Dan Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay. So this is continued until the 22nd when we will do the waivers. Does anybody have anything? We still have some minutes to approve from previous meetings. Ashley, do you have anything else?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for everybody that was joining us this evening. Okay. The next thing we have is I'd like to, I've reviewed the minutes from January 20th and 27th. They came out today. Did other board members have a chance to review those?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Okay. So they just came out today, so maybe we can do that at our next hearing, which is, will be on the 22nd. What's that, Suzanne?
We have a hearing tomorrow. We could do them then.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Tomorrow, we have the hearing for Burns Ave. Okay.
Right.
I forgot, that's a Thursday night hearing. Yes, so if you could review those minutes, I know they just came out today, but if you can review those, then we can get them off the agenda. Okay, does anybody have any other issues? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Suzanne, second by Jane. Any further, this could be just a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, so I'll see everybody tomorrow night, and we'll have George with us, and we're going to discuss the Burns Ave.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, good night. Thank you.